Okay, aloha mai kaho, and welcome to this session of Brown Bag Biography, the longest running seminar series on the University of Hawaii at Manoa campus. This is talk somewhere in the realm of, Zoe, do you know what number it is by any chance?
It is 759, I believe.
All right, this is the 759th talk that's been given in this series since 1987. It was originally founded by George Simpson, the emeritus director of the center, and it is organized by Zoe Spratt, who is the graduate assistant at the Center for Biographical Research, and also Paige Rasmussen, who is the managing editor. And I want to give them a special thanks on this because this is the first one we have ever obviously done this way. It's the first time for everybody on so many different things, but they've managed to pull this together, and we seem to have an audience and we have our speakers, so we'll hope this works. Before I introduce our speakers for today, I want to just mention some of the upcoming events and how you can find out more about them. Let's see here. That doesn't work. Oh, I know where that is. Okay. There we go. Okay. First of all, next week, same time, same place in the virtual universe, Amy Carlson will be speaking on the topic Reading Mediated Identities, Autobiographical Agency in the Material Book, Museum Space, Social Media Platforms, and Archives. Amy is a faculty member at the library, Hamilton Library in the Serials Division. She also recently finished her doctoral dissertation on this topic. And this talk is actually the Biography Prize winner talk. She received the award last year for the best work done in life writing at the University of Hawaii at Manoa campus. It's going to be a very interesting talk. She's just basically addressing the issue of what the expansion of all sorts of environments, including social media platforms, the expansion of our notion of archives, what's happening to the whole culture of the book and whatever, is changing the way that we actually represent human lives, how we tell those stories. And we've got another example of that actually today. If you're interested in finding out about the future events, there's going to be quite a number that are going to extend all the way to December. Almost all of them held at 12 o'clock on Thursdays. Zoe's going to put up in the chat link the Center for Biographical Research mailing list, and also the option for following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to be able to get the updates on these particular events. And we look forward to having you attend one or all of them down the road. Okay. As far as today is concerned, this is the opening session for this particular semester. And the talk today is entitled Waikiki, a narrative feature film about Waikiki, trademark, in Waikiki. And our speakers today are going to be a Hawaiian filmmaker, Christopher Kahunahana, who is a Sundance Institute feature film and Native Lab alumnus. He also is the founder of Fourth World Film, and he directed Lahaina Noon, which premiered at the HIF Festival in 2014. That's the Hawaii International Film Festival, as well as putting together a pseudo-documentary for the Smithsonian Institute's Asian Pacific American A Day in the Life project. And of course, the thing he's going to be talking about today is the very happy completion and movement forward of Waikiki, his new full-length feature film. With him is Nicole Naone, who is the founder of PointHawaii.com, the official media sponsor of the 2016 Hawaii International Film Festival. She herself was the 2013 recipient of the David H. and Doris C. Cromwell Award of Excellence, and she's held speaking engagements on behalf of the University of Hawaii as an alumni expert for its arts and cultural program. Those are the credits. Now I'm going to tell you something about the content that's attached to them. Chris has been a very prominent figure in town for really many years now as a filmmaker, but also, and I think this is very important, a general advocate for the arts and culture. He's been very much involved in the support and the running of venues for arts right across the board. So he not only makes art, but he also makes other people's art possible. And he's been doing that for quite a period of time. Nicole has a whole range of experience in doing similar things. She not only promotes films, finds ways of publicizing them, produces various kinds of projects, but is also engaged in the artistic process. She's often working with the scripts. She's often working on the set, tied into pre-production, production, and post-production. What we're looking at here is in relation to the question then becomes, what are they doing speaking at a brown bag biography seminar? What I'd like to suggest is that in both cases, what we're looking at here is, we're looking at artists that in their work and their actions are foregrounding the notion of life narratives. That basically, and we're hoping we're going to hear today about two narratives. Because in Waikiki, as with Lahaina Noon, what's focused in on are the lives of people. Chris is telling the stories of the lives of people in Hawaii whose lives aren't necessarily the ones we hear about. For example, we don't regularly hear or celebrate the lives of an abusive husband of Japanese ancestry and the dynamic with his wife, or the kind of haunted circumstance of someone who's been involved in a horrible tragedy in the past and been dealing with that trauma, and having those stories told in the same film. So that business of foregrounding life stories of Hawaii, stories that we don't ordinarily get told but are definitely part of the fabric, has been something he's been doing all the way along in his shorts and also now in this feature film. Because the Waikiki in Waikiki is not only one that we highly recognize, but also one that we don't know at all. And the interplay between those two is one of the most powerful aspects of what that film is doing. So the second story here, though, is in addition to producing art that tells the story of people's lives in a way that makes us rethink where we are, we also are going to hear today about the story of how these two people, with a lot of help and a lot of cooperation with other people, the story of how they were able to get a feature film done in Hawaii in this particular way. So I don't want to do any further spoilers on this, so I'm just going to hand things over, and I just very much like to welcome Christopher Kahunahana and Nicole Naone.
Thank you so much for having us. That is an epic introduction.
Thank you. I'd be comfortable with just that.
Yeah, this is a great talk. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Is it okay if we start with a trailer? Give some context, is that cool? Yeah.
You don't need to be here. Just come home.
We all must take care of the Aina, because it will in turn take care of us.
Grandma, is it gonna be alright?
Who's trying to help you and who's not?
Get off me! What are you doing? be okay. You can't help everybody.
How's that? Did that go through?
So
I hope that you enjoyed that. We just were able to exclusively feature that on IndieWire, and so we're excited to be able to have seen the trailer's completion, and we're happy to have been able to share that with you. I think we're going to start with telling a little bit more about ourselves and our journey to get to this point. If possible, we are still seeing some of the stuff. I don't know how to turn that off, but I'm gonna let Chris take it away and get started.
So when we were asked to do this, we were extremely honored. Of course, I had no idea what this would encompass, and it's such an honor to be included, especially as a filmmaker, and to have people accept our art as our voice and value things that take years for us to process and understand and try to find a way to share. And I appreciate you all for joining us today. My name is Christopher Sai'ichi Pomaikai Kahunahana. I am a Hawaiian, born and raised in Waimanalo, Hawaii. I also, growing up, had time. I spent time in Waianae on a ranch. Growing up, my father and my uncles fished and hunted, so I got to experience that. And as you get older, I got to experience living in the city, so I consider myself a little bit country and a little bit rock and roll. Growing up in Waimanalo was an amazing experience, and it was in a different time when people could work and afford to buy a house. And growing up, of course, that's always something that has been a goal for, I guess, everyone, is to be able to own something in Hawaii, myself included. And as I got older, I realized that might not always be true. That might not be possible currently in Hawaii. And those are the kinds of things that tugged on my heart as I started out to write this film. But I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. But how I got into filmmaking was in high school, I went to Kailua High School. I'm a public high school graduate. And they had an amazing photography program. And I got into photography in Kailua High School. And I got to spend a lot of time in the darkroom. That's when I fell in love with the process of capturing an image and watching it magically appear in front of your eyes in a tray. That image had always, still to this day, is like, it feels like magic. It feels like magic. It feels like, I don't know, it's like you're connecting to something beyond yourself. And that physical expression of an idea that's translated through a chemical process, capturing of light, and then it being exposed through a chemical process was like something it still inspires, and I'm in awe of it. So that's kind of where my love for film began. After graduating from high school, I went to the University of Hawaii, and like a lot of kids, I trying to find my place in the world, being from Waimanalo, wanting to have a life that mattered. So I took some courses in business and political science, because I thought that's where the money was, or that was where the influence was, and I could find a voice there. Things didn't quite work out that way. Along the way, I realized there were things that were more important or more exciting to me, and that was filmmaking. And at the University of Hawaii, while I was attending, there wasn't at that time the Academy of Creative Media, and it's a blessing that Chris Lee was able to, since then, help found a place for people like me. But at that time, so we, as filmmakers, we joined this little club, and this club was called the Student Video and Filmmakers Association. It gave me access to equipment, and I got to shoot with Super 8 cameras, 16mm cameras. I learned to edit linearly on tape to tape, and that was an experience that I think was super valuable to my understanding of how to put together a story. And you can't nowadays, just because it's non-linear, I think people, they move forward in the story, they move back, but learning how to do it one step at a time, knowing that eventually you want to get to this place, but you have to start here, really, it's a lesson I think I carry forward as a filmmaker, even though my stories don't tend to be very linear. At University of Hawaii, because there wasn't a major, we kind of cobbled together an independent studies program, which consisted of me taking some creative writing courses through the University of Hawaii English department. I also took dramatic acting courses through the drama department, and some communication courses, some video production courses. While I was doing that, I just really got fascinated with film, and it's like the process of storytelling, from a still photo to motion picture film. Along the same time, I was blessed to have had a mother who was so fascinated with films. She'd go through the newspaper, before you could only find out what was playing through the newspaper, or you could call for, you could get the time from the phone. I don't know if people remember that stuff, but my mom would go through the paper, and she'd actually cross off the whole section of films from the newspaper. And so she was a huge fan of Hawaii International Film Festival, founded by Jeanette Paulson. And while I was going to school, there was this theater in the neighborhood called the Varsity Theater. And my mother would try to see as many films as she could fit in, and it was free then. So she would be in the theater watching one, and she'd have me come during classes. She said, "Cut class, you really want to see this film?" So I'd stand in line for her so that we could get access, because it was first come, first serve, because it's for free, and we get to see a film. And, in that theater is where I really started to understand the potential for film, and it really brought in my vision of what the world. It felt like I got to travel outside of Hawaii for a minute. I hadn't been anywhere, so it's like maybe Maui or the Big Island, or Kaimuki, which is like it was a long bus trip back then. So so I in that experience, it really taught me the potential for film. After University of Hawaii, I was creating these short videos, and at that time there wasn't like a YouTube channel or anything like that. I don't think there was even an internet, and so there was really no place for us to showcase our films. I mean, the quality of film in Hawaii International Film Festival was the best of international cinema. Our little high camera shot films just didn't have a place there, and so we started this alternate film festivals for like people like myself who just want to share it with our friends. It's like we shoot these things. Of course, every film requires a huge crew, so we just screen it for our friends and family, and that's how I started to learn about film outside of Hawaii from a filmmaker's perspective. It's like I got to meet people from San Francisco and New York, to Chicago Underground Film Festival, and this encouraged me or inspired me to want to travel. It's like I hadn't been anywhere yet, so I decided to leave University of Hawaii, and I moved to San Francisco to pursue film, but just more to gain some life experience, because I really believe, it's like it's hard to tell a story if you don't have, if you don't know what stories to tell, or what's valuable about your story. And I think it's only when you get to place yourself in another environment and you get to start to compare and contrast your realities to other people's realities that I was able to see the things that I had that I thought were special and different. But in San Francisco, I mean, there really wasn't. It's not really known as a film town, although there are great filmmakers who had come out of San Francisco. There was Sotro, and other than that, I found a home in these little underground screening rooms in the Mission. And after a while, those experimental films I learned a lot from, but I didn't think that was going to be the films I wanted to make. Having lived in the city, I really started to get inspired by the music scene because I realized it's a great music town. I moved into, I mean, you know, growing up without a lot of resources, so everything you did, you had to work doubly hard for. For instance, to go to University of Hawaii, I bussed tables, I was a valet, I waited tables. You know, waiting tables was a great job. That was like the top of the top. Feels like you made it somehow, but you know, I guess, I mean, it's a great job if you're 22, but it's like it kind of left a taste for, well, I wanted more. You know, like I said, I've always thought I might someday be able to own a home. And so in San Francisco, paying my way, trying to live in a very expensive city at that time, not so expensive, but I was bartending in nightclubs and experiencing amazing jazz in clubs like Storyville and clubs on the Fillmore. And I fell in love with the music scene there and decided that I enjoyed the music so much and the people who were providing the music that I wanted to promote them as artists. So I started doing my own events, promoting music events in San Francisco. And I kind of made a little reputation under the moniker Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, I chose it because he's the hardest working man in show business. So after hustling in San Francisco for a bunch of years, I got kind of tired of doing music, and I knew I always wanted to get back to film. So I chose to leave the city and go to New York. And I thought there was more art, more film accessible to someone like me in New York. And I found that to be very true. It's like immediately upon arriving in New York, I was inspired to write my first feature screenplay, which one day I hope to get to produce, hopefully. But I submitted it to the Tribeca All Access program. I wasn't selected, but this experience of putting pen to paper and sitting down and that kind of focus, trying to get something done, is something I really appreciated about that time. It was very hard for me in the city at that moment. It's like living as an artist in New York without trying to work, legitimately work, was tough. But that made me excited about the potential. It's like, hey man, if I can do this, I can write other screenplays. At that same time, one of my best friends growing up, also he's like an inspiration. Sergio Goyce, photographer, had been in Hawaii, and he always had remembered the experience of our alternative film festival, and he started a little film festival called Cinema Paradise, and he wanted me to come on board as co-partner and co-founder. And so while I was in New York, because I had access to so many filmmakers and artists who were like myself struggling to get their work seen, I started curating film programs from New York to send back to Hawaii. And I also was able to curate art shows from my neighborhood. At that time was Williamsburg, and it was just full of artists, and it was actually pretty affordable. And so I started sending artwork of paintings or such back to my friends in San Francisco, to a gallery called Punch Gallery. And so we'd have these art shows in San Francisco, and then we'd also curate film programs and send it back to Hawaii, and I'd come back to Hawaii and produce this festival. It was a little festival, but it really gave me again the opportunity to see more film and see that the people who are making these films weren't that much different than us. That they were from communities, underserved communities, and so we that film festival, about the same time, there weren't a lot of theaters. A lot of theaters had been closing in Hawaii and Honolulu. So in need of a place to screen these films, we found abandoned building in a neighborhood called Chinatown, which we love. I mean, I have a lot of connections, familial connections to Chinatown. Growing up, my grandfather spent a lot of time there, so I was always with him in his car or walking on the street. I used to go and sneak in as a little kid into the abandoned Hawai'i theater and sit in the dark and just imagine like these huge symphonies or grand plays. And always loved the neighborhood. And on my father's side, my great grandmother actually, she owned a hot dog stand on Hotel Street as a young adult. And the people, when I moved into Chinatown neighborhood to renovate this building, a lot of the old timers from the bar who I'd meet and said, like, they're like, no, my grandparents, and I was like, oh, it felt like the right thing to do. So we set up this theater, nightclubs called Next Door, and we'd screen films there. But soon we realized, films aren't the presentations of films weren't always like profitable, and so it turned more into a music venue. And so we after running it for a few years, it was very successful. We felt like we were contributing to the growth of the neighborhood, the cleaning up of some of the worst, seedier elements of Chinatown. It was like a drug infested neighborhood, which there's still a lot of that. But I think us having invested so much time to bringing people down there, it helped transform the neighborhood. More restaurants moved in, more bars open, more galleries and such. There's always there's found like Louis Poles in there forever. We unfortunately, tragically, my business partner passed away. Sergio died in a diving accident, and at the same time, my other partner, his wife was pregnant with his second child, and they decided to move on from the club. So I kind of got left running the club by myself, which was hard to do. It's something I was learning how to do, and taking on more and more debt. And that's when I, that experience, trying to fight to keep the club open. I think I always thought of as, I joke about it, but it was kind of like my schooling on how to, a lot of the skills I learned in running a nightclub and working with talent and working with different egos was very applicable to me eventually moving on to create Waikiki. But in Chinatown is where this is where I learned to love film, run a business, and I learned about a lot of the characters in film.
And so that's actually where we met. My first experience with Christopher was as an artist doing things in Chinatown, which is also the arts district. And I knew of Chris only exclusively as somebody who was running a space there. And my background, I'm Nicole Naone, I'm one of the producers of Waikiki, the film. My background of getting into that space, it's so interesting of how much Chinatowns all over the world, really, how much they're connectors for different people of various generations and various socioeconomic statuses. And my background was from partially Big Island and partially Oahu. And I always, kind of similar to Chris, of having a upbringing that was very country while also being very city. You don't really see, especially not a Hawaiian one, a narrative of yours represented anywhere. Like you will see a country Hawaiian documentary sort of a thing, or a kitschy Hawaiian touristy sort of a thing, but the nuance involved with being a contemporary Hawaiian was not something represented, and I explored a lot of that within my own art. So I graduated from the Kamehameha School's Kapalama campus, did a bunch of traveling throughout Europe and Asia, and had a lot of amazing giant mistakes and giant experiences that shape us and give us our stories. Mine are not as cool as Chris's SF NYC stories, but
I'm sure they are.
they're not.
One day she'll show them.
They're very tragic. No, but they to make it go by quickly, they also made it so that I did feel that I wanted to come back to Hawaii and work on creating spaces and contributing to a creative community there. And that's sort of where our lives sort of converged, was in this Chinatown space. I was also similarly trying to figure out how to better communicate the things that I had seen growing up, or the experiences that I had. And how do you document things like that? For example, I just did an installation at the mission houses via the Contact exhibition, which is, I mean, please go Google. Contact is an absolute, it's always curated beautifully and done. They do such an amazing job speaking to contemporary art in Hawaii. But it was essentially a karaoke video that I made featuring the chants that were site specific to Makua Valley, projected onto the actual footage of the evictions, projected onto the Hawaii mission houses, which I thought, you know, I really wanted to be able to speak to displacement and houselessness, and the fact that we had a Hawaii mission house preserved as a museum, and literally right next to it is an actual homeless person. And so just being able to converge spaces, we realized we had a lot of similar narratives that we were exploring within our work. But again, both in spaces that at the end of the day, you are in Hawaii and you have to pay bills. And so, you know, come around 2013, he's still running a nightclub. I'm finishing up school and getting into marketing. And it was sort of within that space that, you know, we had sort of this moment of like, you know, it is very much so a now or never. Either these stories are going to be told or they're not. And I'm happy that we were able to really navigate these different spaces so that we could figure out a way to be sharing the stories that just we hadn't been seeing anywhere. And within that space, I think is, you know, the nightclub got sold. I had graduated, and being able to really put all of our energy into this film. And I had zero experience with caring about film at all. I was coming from a sculptor standpoint, but with seeing Chris's creative process and realizing how much larger of an audience and how much more you can do with the film medium, it definitely made me very interested in that medium, because you're dealing with sound and visual and human connection, which I had never even considered. I thought I was very cool just making my wooden sculptures. And when I started realizing the film world exists and that art form, really changed things for me. And I think Chris could speak more to that, of the start of that story being written, and when the notion for Waikiki specifically, how that kind of came about.
So the impetus for Waikiki came about, actually, at Next Door, we did this Showdown in Chinatown projects, which allowed filmmakers to make films in 24 hours. And again, it's the military.
We'll get into that later.
Anyway, so why don't it?
This is actually a part of our performance art piece.
I mean, these kinds of sounds were actually a big part of what I experienced growing up in Hawaii. It's always been frustrating to go, no matter how far away from the city you travel, if you go to the deepest valley, it's always echoing with the traffic of either a tour helicopter or military helicopter. Anyway, they went by. Thank you very much. So rude, so rude. Anyway, so I was in, we did these 24-hour film challenges called Showdown in Chinatown with Tori Tukuafu. And yeah, that always allowed me to continue to make films while I was running a nightclub. But nightclub life, I just knew I'd die there if I didn't hurry up and get the hell out. So, when somebody had offered me the opportunity out, I took it. I just said, I'm gone. Thank you very much. Got to move on. There's better things to do with my time. I love the community that I created there, and I still got to work with all those people afterwards. But I wrote a little short story called Lahaina Noon, and from that, I kind of just went into the next phase, which was writing a feature screenplay, and it's like when you're writing your first feature, there's like such a wealth of backstory and backlog. It's like, how do you, focus all that, everything you want to say into one picture? And that was kind of the problem with it. I wrote earlier drafts, it's just like where it was all over the place. I mean, it was talking about this and that and this and that. And so luckily, there are some generous and brilliant people like Bird Runningwater at the Sundance Labs and her, who saw that underneath those layers and layers and layers of unnecessary or stories that could be told in another story, the Sundance Labs native lab accepted my scribbled screenplay and helped me formulate what was then called Karaoke Kings, and they helped me refine it. Chris Eyre, I had the opportunity to work with Joan Tewksbury. A lot of great people at Sundance are responsible for helping me find the story within the story. And that initial support from Sundance, it helped people believe that the story that I was trying to tell had some kind of value. And without that kind of backing or support, I mean, it's always going to be difficult to make a feature film, especially from Hawaii, a kid from Waimanalo, to make a feature film. It just seems so far away. But that kind of support, and then the initial support from some great friends like Mario Matsuda, who helped raise, the initial money for the film. The film was the Karaoke King screenplay was just too many pages, too long, too impossible for me to shoot on the. I was like, I'm not going to ever be able to raise this money, so I kind of cherry picked some of the characters from that screenplay. Kea, the main character, Amy, Woe, and adjusted it to something that I thought I could shoot. And initially, I thought it would take me, a couple of weekends with friends. Of course, that's never how films end up being, but just that belief that we were going to shoot it no matter what, I think it allowed people to believe in the project as much as we did. And I had this thing, it's called Stone Soup. I don't know if you know that story, but it's if you don't, look it up. It's always been an inspiration of mine. Hawaii is so full of talent. It's always been, and because we were shooting this film, I was able to work with some great Hawaiian filmmakers, cast and crew from top to bottom. Vince Kealu, Lucero, Ryan Miyamoto, Connie was huge. She believed in it when not a lot of people would. So you just need that to get a story out of your head and on the piece of paper and then onto the screen. You definitely need those people to support you along the way, because there was days when, just those little votes of confidence can make the difference between you deciding, you know what, I'm just going to go back to waiting tables, or working construction with my father. That's a great job. So I also, at that same time, I decided to buy a minivan. It's a funny story, but the plan was either this is going to be the star of the film, or it was my plan B. I was going to live in that van. And luckily, I don't have to live in that van, and I got to finish the film. But I feel blessed to have been supported by so many individuals and organizations, and I'm happy to be able to share a little bit of, my story, which I hope contributes to the larger story and the complexities of Hawaii I mean, it's not ever been as simple as people have portrayed it to be.
Yeah. And I think that a large part of something that you cannot prepare for, and the fact that our stories, you know, we're a living people and we have living stories, something that we didn't anticipate happening, but I think very, very much so affected, I know firsthand affected Christopher drastically during the conceptualization of Waikiki, was in 2014, Lanakila Manuel, amongst others, marched up the mountain to stop, to protest and protect Mauna Kea. And that was very much so a very large part of seeing, regardless of anyone's political stance on where they land with that issue, for us to be seeing, especially coming from Big Island, my first job was working at the Hana Ranch at the base of Mauna Kea, seeing Hawaiians stand up for what they believe in at that altitude, literally, was huge. And
that level of commitment,
and that level of fearless engagement was essentially something that, you know, we were both trying to do with our own art forms. And so it drastically changed our comfort level in speaking to different issues. When, you know, our film deals a lot with displacement and socioeconomic issues, and the issues that come, you know, it's matching graphs across the board whenever you deal with colonization and occupation, and even on the minor level of gentrification, you get the drug abuse, domestic violence, mental illness, and the you know, those sorts of things were, you know, pre 2014 Mauna Kea were things that, let's kind of touch on this. And when we saw other Hawaiians having the courage to really just come out and completely be fearless in how to speak on how they felt, it allowed for, I think, the story to change drastically, and for Chris to have a lot more courage as well, in terms of being able to just, no, she lives in a van. No, she does have this many jobs. No, it is that hard to do XYZ. I'm speaking about the main character, Kay, in the film. And just as a producer, from a production standpoint, I think something interesting with that film was we stopped. So when with this past round, 2019, of that sort of second wave of everybody going up to the mountain, those sorts of things, we were in post-production, and we had to have a very serious talk amongst ourselves of what are we going to, you know, we're in the middle of this, but where are our values? Who are we if we're making a film about exposing issues, if we are not actively, you know, standing up for the things that we believe in as well? And everything got put on pause, and we went and lived on the Mauna for months, and contributed to the amazing media team that
Naleo
sort of
Kako.
Naleo Kako, that just sort of got pulled together with you know, phenomenally talented. You have the kids at Kanaio Kana, and all of Oiwi, and so many. I mean, it was
everyone's contribution.
It was really amazing having that, and I was surprised at how much even the film community was very much okay with that. Like, so Filmmaker Magazine did a write-up sort of attesting to that, and it was just so amazing to us that we were living in a time where we weren't being demonized for putting, you know, choosing your values over, you know, putting a film on hold and stuff like that. And so it is really an amazing testament to, I think, the time that we're living in right now, for Christopher to be coming from a space of you know, having to hodgepodge a degree to try to create a film degree, to now we're in a time of, you know, Chris Lee's amazing. There's an entire department and you're actually allowed to speak to things that are a little uncomfortable. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know.
No, it's amazing. You know, I've been trying to do it for so long, and just to see, you know, how much the local film community has grown. You know, with all the giant productions, you know, always being Hollywood's backlot, it definitely trained a lot of our crew members to be top notch, and having access to that kind of knowledge as a director, and saying, hey, you know, these people know how to do this thing. You know, it's like, and they want to do these things. And so that was a huge blessing to have them there. And you know, I'm super excited about those organizations who are now funding narrative shorts, which, you know, previously, like Pacific Islanders and Communications, although Hawaii has an amazing reputation for powerful documentarians and documentaries like, you know, Puhi Pao and
Kiara Lacey.
Phenomenal. It's like now myself included, I feel we can move into a fictional narratives, which, you know, there's a difference between the two. One is like it's just a different way of telling a story. I think, you know, our stories benefit, our Molelo benefits from us being able to tell it from spirit. Sometimes, you know, it's like things don't have to be so black and white. And I look forward to all the work coming out of Hawaii from Kanaka filmmakers like Aaron Lau, Tai Sang, Alika, Justin Chong, Aina. I mean, there's so many talented Kanaka filmmakers that I feel a part of that community, and I feel you guys should be excited about what's coming from them. I'd say within the next year or so. I know they have a lot of projects in the works, so it feels like it's a great time. And it's weird, but you know, when you're so deep in the process of creating something, I found it necessary to consult, you know, my ancestors, like my kupuna, and they always said, wait, you know, wait, the time will be right. And I feel like there's definitely a wave that, you know, with Black Lives Matter movement, people are more open, even just Waikiki, for instance. This COVID and the shutdown, I think, allows people to see a different use of Waikiki. You know, experiencing Waikiki without 30,000 people a day in it. You know, it's like made people realize, like, hey, maybe there is a different way, and they're willing to have those conversations. I think now that they weren't willing to have even just a year or 2 years ago. So I feel blessed that the time just feels right now, even though with those huge sacrifices, like she had mentioned, halting post-production to support something we totally believe in. Being able to experience the uprising of the Lahui was,
And speaking of conversation, thank you, first of all, so much for filling us in on that and providing all that information, because you basically gave a mini history, not only of your own process, but in some ways the process of Hawaii film over the last while. What I'm hoping I can do right now is open it up, and we can maybe ask some of the people who have been listening if they have questions about Waikiki, or questions about your process, or questions about the future of Hawaii film. So I think what we're doing here is that if people enter their questions in the chat, I will then pass that on to you. Did you hear all that?
We did hear all of that. I
Okay.
know on our end, if you don't, would you mind reading them to us?
Oh yeah, we're all set.
We're actually not trying to look cool. These are our prescription glasses, but even just from here, there's no way we can read anything.
No, we'll read them to you.
Perfect. Okay.
will you answer them too?
Okay, while I'm waiting for them to fill in, I'm going to ask the standard publicity tour question. What's next for Waikiki? What do you? Where's it going next? Because I know distribution is one of the biggest issues always.
So that's also interesting, and for some reason we feel it's the right time for it. It's like having because of COVID and the pandemic, a lot of films that were in production had to halt production. So from what we're gauging from our initial inquiries with sales agents is that it's a good time to actually sell the film, and so that's very hopeful because making this film, like who's gonna want to watch a film about Hawaii, but what we have next is we're doing a festival, a couple of festivals coming up. Our next screening is for Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. That's at the end of October, and I think that one you can only watch if you're in the it's geo-blocked to a certain location. But I think if people want to see the film, it'll definitely be available later in the year. We just started. We just had one screening so far, so we definitely look forward to screening at more festivals and being able to show them eventually.
There's really exciting things planned for showing it in Hawaii, and we're not allowed to talk about them quite yet, but it's very exciting.
Yeah,
I can't wait until we can talk about it.
Okay, we got our first question here. This is from Danielle Said, who's actually just joined the English department. She's a specialist in Asian American film and indigenous film, and actually got an MA from us, and then was our PhD from Oregon, and is now here teaching. So there's another strong film advocate at UH, and this is her question. Congrats on the film. I cannot wait to see it. From the trailer, the music and sound design in the film are completely arresting and haunting. Can you talk about how you approach sound design in the film?
So it's actually, I love when people want to know more about that, because there is so much, a lot of this process, we realized how desensitized we were to certain things about Hawaii, coloring being one of them, but sound being a major one. So we have Oscar-winning sound designer Ben Wilkins, who did Whiplash. He just finished Black Beauty. He's who did the sound design, and what was just completely arresting to them was how many planes and helicopters. People do not realize that when people see Hawaii from a postcard or that they have no idea that the audio behind that sunset postcard is a ton of planes. And
so it's like jet planes.
And so it was that sound design element, even within the film, was very shocking for people who work on sound.
Also,
so that there's that element in terms of just the actual sound design. With scoring, we have the amazing Woody Pack, who worked with Ted De Oliveira, and they do amazing things as well. Specifically to the trailer, I think that that's a really great space where elements of Chris's original screenplay, Karaoke Kings, come in. So you have like a Korean, it's my personal karaoke song that I do. In addition to being Hawaiian, that Korean's there as well. But having a song from that, there's elements that come from the original screenplay that made it in, which I think is really cool as well.
We also, I was lucky to work with one of my mentors. He was like a great sound recordist, and making a film, I think it always starts there. It's like you need someone who's like the best, and we had John Ku'umo'o, rest in peace. He just recently passed on to the other side, but we had been able to get him to help us contribute to our little project. When you start with great sound recording, definitely makes it a lot easier to design. And like she was saying, I think a lot of the sound design, it's like working natural sounds with enhanced sounds, and then also score. When we were doing the score, I definitely wanted nature to be a part of what the music of Hawaii is. If you take away all the other elements of the industrialization and the Russian pace of contemporary Hawaii.
Okay, here's Let me take that off. Yeah, okay, you can hear me. This is actually two questions put together. I'm going to put them together because both of them are co-editors of the journal Biography and heavily associated with the Center for Biographical Research. This is Cynthia Franklin and John Zern, who I believe is at the moment in maybe North Dakota. At any rate, what Cindy says is, and I'll put them together because they are related and they say they are. I was lucky enough to see this powerful film. Can you talk about some of the stereotypes you address in the film and the ways you want the film to challenge or complicate them? And what were some of the challenges of taking these on for a wide as well as a Hawaii audience? And then part two from John. Can't wait to see this. This question picks up on Cindy's. To what extent did you find yourself wanting to teach audiences outside Hawaii about things in the deep historical background of the story? If you did, how did you handle that storytelling? So Hawaii stereotypes, Hawaii history, Hawaiian mana'o.
Thank you for those very simple questions.
Yes.
Let me Google some things. No.
Cindy just typed haha, so she's laughing too.
I love her so much. Okay.
Softball.
Yeah, just a simple.
Just a simple one.
Let me just say no. What I love about that question is that it comes with a distinction that we realize that we were doing that we should stop doing, which is that there even should be a difference between Hawaii audience versus not Hawaii audience. To me, we realize when you start to decolonize your mind and realize, like, actually, I can hold up a mirror and not have to filter it so that somebody else, it's like, no, that's what's happening here. And it's okay if not everybody gets a specific joke. That's our reality. And, I think when people try to create an authentic story for a different audience is when you essentially run into poverty porn issues, where people get so excited to see how terrible it is and these sorts of things. And so for us, it was like, we're not making this for them or for, we're just holding up a mirror of this is what our experiences are like and these are the things that we see, and like, are stereotypes included in that? Absolutely. Is there different layers of kona there? Absolutely. Like, is somebody gonna catch, in a different audience who's not from here, somebody gonna catch that we started with the clouds and you can follow the water to see when it gets backed up at the alawai, and that mirrors the entire theme of the film in terms of land displacement and water rights issue? No, they're absolutely not going to get it, and that's fine. The person who is going to get it, and that doesn't mean that it's not for them and only for but we should not be changing our narrative depending on who is watching it. They can do their Googling and adjust to say, okay, well, what are they talking about here?
Yeah, I think the challenge with anytime you try to tell a story is to try and just tell it as true as you know. And I did a lot of it's like I had to unpack a lot of layers of things that I didn't understand about what made me angry, what drama, what traumatic experiences had I had that contributed to me wanting to tell these stories. And I think it's like, as the artist, you kind of just always look in and you try and forget that people are going to eventually see your project. And I mean, there's huge chunks of time where I hadn't spoken to anybody about the film, and I just was spent a lot of time, on the Kahunahana coast at the shore, trying to commune with nature and my ancestors. The goal is to, hopefully the film has successfully expressed things that I was trying to figure out about my experiences of being Hawaiian or just living in Hawaii.
Also, just to clarify, Christopher means that literally. Christopher literally goes to Kaiwi Coast and literally engages with nature and has these conversations and engages with the moon and engages with the lands. And I think that that's something that really helped shape this. Is, the co-author of this film is Hawaii. it was definitely,
Absolutely.
you know, not an easy process, as you know, with
It wasn't an
with-
ABC
it was not an
story,
ABC
you know,
situation. And I think that
it's
Chris,
changed and changed and changed and changed.
I think that Chris, you know, what I really commend Chris on is that he was able to recognize the importance of what we were talking about and know that it to authentically hold up the clearest mirror possible, that he was going to have to engage those before us, those after us, and the lands around us. And that's not an easy process. It's much easier to just sort of, I'm sharing my own narrative, and I definitely commend you for how much work you did in that regard of consulting with the moon. You know,
it's like, yeah, there's this thing in filmmaking, there's like the story's authored 3 times, once in the writing, once in the directing, and another time in the editing. I definitely feel that intimately. It's like I felt, I mean, if, you know, even the cast and crew, they saw the screenplay, it looks nothing like the film currently. And I think I've learned one thing I took from navigators or people who are close to the ocean. It's like, if you're in the middle of the ocean and, you know, it's too cloudy to see, you can't tell where you are, you lose your bearings. You know, some people say, well, you just keep pushing forward. Well, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, if you don't know where you're going, sometimes you just put your sails down and wait. And sometimes in that waiting is when things become more clear. And I think I was lucky. I feel like I got to work on the same picture for so long that I learned a lot of things about the story that weren't evident in the initial writing.
And just in response, Cindy said, what I love about the film is that I felt it spoke first and foremost to a Hawaii audience without worrying it would make Hawaii look bad or misunderstood or that they would miss stuff. And then John responded, that's great. Thanks for helping me rethink questions like mine. Here's a question or a statement from, more like a statement from somebody you may have heard of. This is Vilsone Heranico.
Hey, Billy. Billy was a huge inspiration. He's been, he's helped me figure so much stuff out about not only the film, but as being a native filmmaker. And he's been a mentor of mine, and I'm blessed to have him. Consider him a friend. And I mean, he's put so much thought and soul and heart into me trying to figure out what I wanted to say. But so, hi, Billy.
Christopher had no idea, because it's basic, you know, for how many years now, it's just been me trying to, and my voice loses merit after a while when I'm like, no, you can do. Vili saying this is good is basically the only thing that kept Chris going. When Vili was like,
Vili's like, I like it. I'm like, all right.
I'm like, do you believe? Okay, he's got it. Yes. Vili was like, I'm like, thank you, Vili and Jeanette. He believes your opinion. It is good. He's got it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, as you see from this, he likes you. Yeah. Well, as you see from this, he likes you too. This is a landmark. This is Billy.
We don't see on our end. We don't see it. I don't know if we're supposed to see. On our end, we don't see or hear anything. I'm sorry.
Let's try this. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you. Yes.
All right. For what I said was, as you will understand from this, Billy likes you too. This is his statement. This is a landmark film, and from now onwards, when people in future talk about filmmaking in Hawaii, they'll have to reference Waikiki as a turning point in films made about and set in Hawaii that debunk the myth that Hawaii is paradise. This is the most powerful and most authentic film about Hawaii and is a must-see for everyone who loves Hawaii, its beauty, but also its tragic history of dispossession and displacement. Thank you, Chris and Nicole, for this cultural treasure.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Billy. Oh man, I'm tearing up. Thank God I have this class.
It's so awkward to
you.
get, so much praise for something that I babied this film, and it's like,
And especially from a blank screen.
No, but thank you. It's been a rough one, and it's amazing feedback, especially like a Billy. It's like, what? Thank
If
you.
you haven't seen Billy's film Land Has Eyes, please do.
Oh, man.
It's definitely been a landmark film in Polynesian filmmaking, and it's
Game
like
changer.
a game changer, along
Yeah.
with Well Rider
Well Rider,
and
I know which one you're trying to say. Jake. But
yeah, Jake the Monk.
Jake the Mock. It's terrible that that's what we always remember from. Once We're Warriors.
Yeah, once for warriors. Yeah. We have time for one more question. If somebody would like to type one in.
Gemini Leo.
Oh, that explains everything.
Right?
Like, oh, that's all you have to say.
Yeah, and it also is life writing, so you got that too. Okay, what I'd like to do right now then is just thank you very much for sharing. We got both the stories I was hoping to get, your stories of how you did it, and also a very good sense of the story that you actually tell. And I'm really excited to know that we're going to get multiple opportunities and ways of being able to see Waikiki. I'd also like to mention that Lahaina Noon is up online, and you can in fact see the entire film anytime you would like to. And just sort of following up when Danielle was saying, the color palette in Lahaina Noon, the shifts from blues to oranges to reds, the whole movement around in that film suggests something just in terms of spectrum, and not just color spectrum, but cultural spectrum as well. And just from what I've seen of Waikiki, I think you're going to have the same enjoyment of the palette as you do of the Mo'olelo. So I'd like to thank both of you again for participating. It's a great way for us to get our series started, and best of luck. And we're looking forward to seeing Waikiki unfold.